What's going on, Center City Church?
You already know.
Yes, welcome to our 6th week. I was walking through this. We've already been 6 weeks in James. We're only in the second chapter, but 6 weeks in.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was sitting with another pastor last week, and he was talking about how excited they are to go through a 5-week journey through James.
Oh,
And I was
that's
like-
what we thought at first.
I was like, 5 weeks? No, he's like, yeah, I'm just going to hit one chapter a week. And I just literally started laughing at him. He was like, what's so funny? I was like, yeah, good luck. Call me when you get through chapter 1. He
Yeah,
started
well, I
laughing.
mean, that's exactly what we did. We
Absolutely.
blocked off 5 weeks for it, but you were wise enough to know we may need a little longer, so we'll be flexible, and here we are.
Absolutely flexible.
And
it's
I'm
been a lot of
enjoying
fun.
it. Going
Yeah.
slowly just really helps. I think it helps us kind of see where he's going and how things build on each other, and it's nice. I'm enjoying it.
So am I.
But before we get to the actual message, yesterday was Father's Day, or Sunday was Father's Day, and you have a hidden talent that I don't think anyone in the room knew about, which is telling dad jokes.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a hidden talent.
It's not hidden anymore.
No, I'm all tapped out. I'm all tapped
You
out.
don't have one more dad joke for us.
I could have a dad joke, but I'd have to search the dado base.
Okay, well, that's it for today, guys.
Thank you. Thank Dom. Dom, the editor of this video. Dom is the one who actually gave us that joke.
Yeah, thank you, Dom, for
Yes.
that. If you have a great dad joke, please put it in the comments for my
please.
entertainment, because
Please.
they're my favorite form
Let's
of
do
humor.
this. If you have a good dad joke and it makes it to the comments, when me and Ashley are doing announcements, we will share them with the congregation on Sunday.
Done.
That is the goal. Now, if it's not good, we're not going to tell you it's not good. We just won't share it.
I mean, I might still share it. We'll see.
Can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait. So, from dad jokes to James.
Yes.
This week was just a really powerful message, because I think you hit on a lot of tension that we kind of feel just being people who love Jesus, want to follow Jesus in a world that doesn't always look like Jesus, which I guess is what everyone's navigated throughout history, trying to follow Jesus. But this idea of living faith and dead faith, and how living faith is shown by what we do. Will you talk just a little bit? I know you can't hit every detail the way you did on Sunday, which was so helpful, about kind of this difference between what we do, like earning our place with God, and like
Yeah.
what it means that our deeds represent and show our living faith.
I mean, technically what you're explaining is the challenge that all of the New Testament has. Remember, Old Testament faith was based off your observance of the law. And the law was given out of love, right? And God, in his mercy, sets the law into place in order so that when Jesus comes, he fulfills the law.
Sorry. I just thought about the database joke again. It made me laugh. But keep going with your serious teaching.
So what you're explaining as, what you're describing as a struggle that we have and that we've had for years is really the struggle of the Old and New Testament, where Paul and James and John and so many of the writers are trying to kind of line up for us, is this idea that, no, salvation has come, and salvation has come in Jesus, and the only way to accept that salvation is by accepting the mercy and grace that Jesus offers. But then James wants to make sure we know that your salvation should transform the way that you live. So your faith in Jesus without works that are birthed from that faith is actually a dead faith. So that's really kind of the focus of chapter 2, verses 14 through, and really the focus of where we settled on Sunday, like an opportunity to teach this idea, like how you live should be affected by what you believe. Now again, just to be really clear, James is not teaching that you work for your salvation. He's teaching that you work out of your salvation, which is a huge difference, but I believe it's necessary in a day like today. I've grown up in different seasons of church structure. I've seen seasons where we've used holiness to kind of bash people on top of the head and kind of try to fit everybody into box. And if their activities don't line up with our subscribed activities, that somehow they're not honoring God. And yet, in the same breath, we've kind of seen the pendulum swing to the other side where everything goes, and you can say you love Jesus on Monday, and on Tuesday every activity of your life is birthed out of your own greed and your own lusts and your own appetites, and it has nothing to do with God. And James would say, just so that everybody's clear, faith comes through, salvation comes through faith in Jesus, but that faith should dictate how we act and live and move, and we should see fruit of our faith.
Yeah, and what I love is that James gives two examples of
Yes.
this from the Old Testament, because even in the way you were explaining that, we can sometimes almost think that God was different in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And while there are things that changed when Jesus came and completed the work of sacrificing himself and being raised from the dead, God was still the same. And so I think it's cool that James then goes all the way back to first Abraham and talks about his living faith. Will you talk just a little bit about what it looked like for Abraham to be willing to sacrifice Isaac?
Yeah, so really, if you remember the story of Abraham, or maybe you've never heard it before, it's a great story to read, specifically around Father's Day. That the promise that God had offered Abraham required Abraham and his wife to have a child, and yet they're later on in life to the point that the idea of her being pregnant was laughable, and it's at that point that God said, well, I'm going to give you a child now. And then God gives him this incredible child in Isaac, and then within a couple verses, God's like, give him back to me. Like, you're going to take the life of your son. And if when you read the story, you'll find that Abraham goes to sacrifice, and at the last minute, God tells Abraham, no, there's a ram in the thicket, and provides a sacrifice and replacement for Isaac. It's this beautiful picture of redemption and how there's a salvation that's coming through Jesus, and there's a ram in the thicket. I love that picture, but Hebrews ascribes the faith of Abraham by saying he was willing, even though Isaac was the promise fulfilled, he was willing to offer it back to the promise giver. And really, I think James uses that as an example that real faith lives open-handed, that we're willing to give and do whatever it is that God asks us to do and give, and it should affect the way that we live day to day.
Yeah, and I hesitate to share this because you don't want to be like, follow my example, because we follow Jesus' example.
Absolutely.
But you just sharing that just then kind of reminded me of one of the ways that I try to live open-handed, not like Abraham, I don't have a son to sacrifice, but for me, my home is something that the Lord really miraculously provided, that I prayed for, and I have this one particular painting that I've loved, but really felt like the way that I was supposed to put it on the wall was with push pins, because it was a reminder that at any point, if the Lord is to say, it's time for you to go, whether to a new home or overseas, like I'm going to be ready to go at any point.
I've talked to God. You're not allowed to go back overseas.
I'm not planning on it.
I'm just telling you. I've already talked to him.
If you want to frame the painting.
I'm just kidding.
But something like that just helps me to visualize and not get too attached to the gift, so that I stop listening to the giver.
It's a weird balance, right? Because, yes, we're not of this world. So really the picture that I love, Paul actually paints quite eloquently, is this idea that we're people who live in tents, right? Like, when it's time to move, we move. And we're not kind of settled here because this isn't our home.
It's like camping.
It's
intense.
It's intense. Oh,
Hey-o.
I got to regroup after that one.
You started it on Sunday.
Yeah, I did. It's over. But really, then he also paints the picture that although we're not of this world, we live in the world, right? So we're living in the world, which means we have to be faithful to make sure that we're doing everything we can and stewarding the promises and the blessings that God has given us. But remember, the blessings and the promise are not the promise giver. They're not the blessing giver. And it's him who we're called to serve and obey. And at any point, as seasons change and shift, which they have in my life, like they have in your life, like they have in so many of you who are watching, we have to learn how to be faithful to follow the Lord's leading, and it changes the activity of our lives based off of the rooting of our faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much more. Watch the message, but I want to keep moving, because then James does something super strange. Like, talking about Abraham, that's not hard to understand, but then he brings up Rahab. Talk a minute about why it's crazy that he's even bringing up Rahab as an example.
Well, she's a woman, she's a Gentile, and she's a prostitute. So within the scope of the cultural context right now, James is really framing this picture that whether you're a legacy character of the faith, or you're this woman who, in again, cultural context, didn't necessarily have the ability to buy property, couldn't necessarily live on her own within the scope.
Couldn't testify in court.
Couldn't testify in court. a Gentile, which in the eyes, remember, James is writing to Hebrew believers who've been scattered, and even then, there was a very big surprise, almost nationalistic perspective that anyone outside of the Jewish faith were less than. So she's not only a woman, but she's less than because she's Gentile, and then she's a prostitute, which, even then wasn't necessarily considered as a highly regarded occupation. So, and yet, he's quick to point out that even her faith had activity that honored God. And it showcased like this picture that faith is not about people, not about position, it's about people. That God is more concerned about your inheritance than your heritage.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important.
Yeah, and I think that's important for some of us to hear, because sometimes we can discount ourselves because we look at all those things that might be like, well, God's not going to use me because I'm this and I'm not this enough. But the reality is, if we're open and we have faith, God will use all of us.
I mean, the funny thing is, we tend to lift up the people like Abraham and David and Moses. And we forget that before they were Abraham and Moses and David, that they were men who failed constantly. Isaac wasn't his first child because Abraham made a bad decision. David, although was chosen as a king, he was the runt of the litter and made horrible decisions and still had a heart after God. And Moses was a stuttering, stammering, all these guys made their mistakes. And yet, because we see the story at the end, we have a tendency to heighten them. I think James just kind of reminds us, no, all of us have sinned and fallen short in the glory of God. And whether your heritage is one long line of, like me, I have a lineage where we're 4 and 5 generations deep in the faith, which is beautiful. Or maybe you just got saved last week and no one in your family has ever even talked about the faith. Gotta say, no, there's faith that's available to every and to all, and it's not about your position, it's about people.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone if maybe they listen to the message on Sunday and they're listening to this podcast and there's kind of that moment of realization that my faith is not looking like a living faith? What would your advice be for how to move forward in that without coming to a place where you make deeds what you think is earning your position?
Yeah, so it's funny because I think there's some characteristics of different areas of life that really would lend well to kind of help us understand this better. For instance, relationship. Let's just pretend that you said, man, I have this really good friend. We love each other. We talk all the time. I know everything about them. And then I ask you the question like, so what kind of food do they like? And you're like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Or what, where are they from? I don't know. What's their family life like? I don't know. There's a really good chance that what you're communicating isn't necessarily the truth. You're communicating a sense of the truth, but it's not reality. So I would say that the same solution to fix that relationship is one that would fix kind of the wiring of your faith. What I mean by that is, what is the obvious solution? That you spend time and ask right questions, right? I really do feel that the heart of God is bent on relationship. It's his desire to know you and for him to also be known. Like he knows every aspect of who you are, but he wants you to know every aspect of who he is. And what I've learned is the more I know about him, I find myself in so much of that. Like I'm the revelation of who I am is found in the more revelation of who he is. So I know that this seems like the answer we give at the end of every one of these podcasts. Like, what's the practical takeaway? But when it comes to rewiring your faith, first it starts with more time with the God who you say you believe in. If he is the cornerstone, if he is the root of everything that I believe in, and I want to base my life on him, then I really should spend time figuring out who he is and spend more time with him. And what I love about God is it's not heavy. It's not the type of thing that's like it should, like he says it, come to me all who are heavy and burdened, and I'll give you rest because my yoke is light. Like his desire is that you would know him. So it starts with relationship, but I'm going to also say at one point or another, there needs to be an accountability. Are you measuring your activity? Like, is there times where you're sitting down thinking, okay, well, this is kind of, why did I act this way? Why did I respond to that issue this way? And you have people around you that love you enough to I'm afraid of using terminology that we use within our circle, but to check you on things, right? Like, I really do feel like we run away from judgment as a culture, right? Don't judge me. Only God can judge me. I want a couple people around me, that are saying that's not a good look, bro. That's not a good look. No matter how you kind of dice that out, that's not good. And I do have those people, and I think everybody should have those people. And I would love for those people to be people that you meet within community here at Center City, whether it's small groups, whether those conversations that happen organically on Sunday, or you're meeting with somebody over coffee. But I do feel like between a more rooted relationship with the Lord through his word and prayer, and more accountability to each other, we can then make sure that all of our activity is being birthed out of our heart of faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't often say this on the podcast, but if that's you and you're just kind of trying to figure out this week how to navigate that, who those people in your life may be, we have an email address, prayer@centercity.church, that we would just love to come alongside and pray with you about that. But also, if you have questions, help you navigate through that, because it's worthwhile to get this right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, are we moving into chapter 3 this week?
We are.
Wow.
Controlling the tongue, Ashley.
Yeah. Another light and easy one.
It doesn't stop. And I'm just gonna tell you until we finish this. This is like warning to the rich and drawing close to God, and warning about self-confidence and patience and endurance. So
yeah. One thing at a time.
One thing at a time.
Taming the tongue.
It really has been a lot of fun. And really, our hope on Sunday mornings is that people walk away inspired and encouraged to the change that God is asking them to bring. And ultimately, that in our time together, we would glorify God with our attempt to be more like him.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, we cannot wait to see you Sunday at 10 a.m. right here or online. Have a great week, and we'll see you then.
Hey, did we talk about the marriage conversation last week in the podcast? I think we did a little bit.
We may have. I don't remember, to be totally honest.
It went phenomenal. And I'm only telling everybody because in like 4 or 5 weeks, we're doing the same thing with anyone who's not married. Right. I got to come up with a better word, because I say singles. And
I mean, that is the word.
I know.
As a single person, that's the word.
Okay. So if you're single.
If you're not married.
If you're not married.
And you're at least 1 year out of high school.
Yes.
Then we would love for you to come. It's July 16th at 10 a.m. And it's just going to be roundtable conversations about what it looks like to live a very good life in your singleness.
Now, that registration is open, right?
It is open.
So we'll put a link in the bio or the description of this video so that if you're interested, you can hang out with us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll have fun. So we'll see you at that or on Sunday at 10.
Woo!